Now. So hello and welcome everyone to this webinar titled What is MedDRA and How is it used? I'm Carol Ann Wilson and work as a medical officer at the MSSO and will be your instructor today. And I'm supported by my colleague Leander, who was talking to you before. So together we will take you through this webinar, which will last for about 2 hours. Leander mentioned already that we would like to make this webinar interactive, so please submit your questions or send us your comments through the question panel. And I will allow as much time as possible for questions both during the course and also at the end of the presentation. We will start with 2 standard slides with some relevant information about MedDRA in this training material. ICH adopted the development of MedDRA in the mid-1990s and finally became the owner of the terminology. ICH then, on contract, appointed the MSSO to take care of the maintenance and further development of the terminology based on user feedback, to provide and organize corresponding training, and to administer the MedDRA licenses. And all these activities are overseen by the so-called ICH MedDRA Management Committee, with members of the ICH parties, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency of the UK, Health Canada, and the WHO as an observer. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA itself, but also owns this training material. It is protected worldwide. You may use the slides, with the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos, but will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. Also, any adaptations of the slides have to be clearly labeled. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issues you should be aware of, and the third bullet point is not relevant for today. Let me provide you now with an overview on what we will cover today. We will first talk about the MedDRA background and its governance. We will then address its scope, structure, and its characteristics, and then look into how MedDRA is maintained, and also look at some helpful tools provided by the MSSO that you can use as a MedDRA subscriber. These are the MedDRA browsers that can be used to browse the terminology and look for appropriate terms for coding purposes, but also the MVAT tool that can be used to compare different versions of MedDRA. I will demonstrate some features of the browser to provide you with some information about its functionalities. Afterwards, we will discuss MedDRA coding in general and 2 important documents you should make yourself familiar with, the so-called Points to Consider documents or PTC documents. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk shortly about the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs that were developed to assist in data retrieval, presentation, and data analysis of MedDRA coded data. And we will conclude with a question and answer session as mentioned at the beginning. But we will address your questions throughout the session as well, so you don't have to wait to raise them. In order to make our webinars more interactive, or as interactive as possible, we are using quiz questions in between. And this slide now explains about the polling. The easiest way to join the polling is to scan this QR code here with your cell phone or tablet, and it will bring you directly to the poll. But you can also enter the specified web address into the URL bar at the top of your internet browser on your computer, tablet, or cell phone, pollf.com. It will then take you to a log-on screen, and you'll be asked for a username. The poll is completely anonymous, so you don't need to enter your name, but please enter my name as the username, that is Carol Ann Wills 584, with no spaces, and then just click join, nothing else to be entered. And as soon as I activate the first question, you'll be able to see it and respond. I just leave it on the screen for a moment, but you don't have to get under time pressure because you will see these credentials on each slide that relates to the quizzes. And also, if you lose connection in between, just let us know, and I can show the QR code again during the session as well. So let's see whether it works. Yes, it does seem to work. And I think it's Japan, India, it's Taiwan, China, Syria, I think it is, Spain, buenos días, Italy, buongiorno, many people in Europe, Iceland, and South Africa is with us, Indonesia, Turkey is there, Spain. So welcome everyone. I'm sitting in Berlin in Germany, and nice to meet you all. Happy to have you all with us. Let's start with the first topic on our agenda, the MedDRA background and governance. So what is MedDRA? MedDRA stands for Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities. But actually, MedDRA is not a dictionary with an alphabetical list of medical terms and their definition. It is rather a terminology that includes and organizes a wide range of medical terms. So MedDRA structures these terms not in alphabetical order, but based on a defined system. It is important to realize that MedDRA does not contain definitions. So when confronted with medical terms you are not familiar with and that need to be coded, you will have to use some reliable medical references like the Dorlands, medical textbooks, or online references like the Merck manual, for instance. Let us start with one general question. What do you think are the benefits of using MedDRA? What are the benefits of using MedDRA on a global level? It's a global standard, meanwhile. So use of universal terms across languages. Yes, standardization. Exactly, standardized data. We use the same terminology worldwide. Yes, standardization. Harmonization. And exactly, this is what it is all about. It's harmonization, standardization. Centralized system with uniformity and safety reporting. Standardization of the data. Exactly. You're right. Standardized data for use globally. Standardization. So let me close the poll. Most of you really got it right. MedDRA is about standardization. And with the standardization achieved with MedDRA, we are now speaking the same language when talking about safety data from pre-marketing in clinical development to post-marketing in pharmacovigilance. And MedDRA has replaced the old legacy terminologies like CoSTART that was mainly used in clinical studies and WHOART that was mainly used in post-marketing. It is not only used by biopharmaceutical industry, but also by the regulators around the globe. The terminology is used for entering and coding clinical data, but it also has features that support data retrieval and analysis, as well as presentation of clinical safety data. We will not be able to go into much detail about operational coding and data retrieval today, but you have the option to attend additional webinars that we offer. Today, I just provide an overview. So if you want to get more details, you have the option to join 2 webinars for new coders that are called Coding Basics and Advanced MedDRA Coding, and also additional 2 webinars for MedDRA users who work more in the data retrieval and analysis area. And these are called Data Analysis and Query Building with MedDRA, and another one, addresses the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs. The explanation of MedDRA's purpose holds the key words of our session today: standardization of exchange of clinical information. MedDRA allows us to use a common language when exchanging clinical information. It is used for product evaluation, for monitoring product safety, for communication of clinical specifics and activities related to product oversight. Standardization and harmonization that has been achieved with MedDRA is further enhanced by other initiatives of ICH, like the ICH standards for electronic reporting and data exchange, like E2B, for instance. And when it comes to coding and data retrieval and analysis for medicinal products, MedDRA supports not only pharmaceuticals or drugs, but also biologics, vaccines, and drug-device combination products. From a governance point of view, the ICH MedDRA Management Committee that is appointed by the ICH Assembly provides oversight of MedDRA-related activities, including the activities of the MSSO, the Maintenance and Support Services Organization. This slide further explains the relationship of the ICH Management Committee and the MSSO. So ICH owns MedDRA, and the ICH Management Committee contracts with the MSSO to maintain the terminology. It has oversight on all operations of the MSSO by meeting regularly with the MSSO management, by setting subscription rates, and approving future development plans and MSSO services. Membership does not only include ICH regulatory authorities, but also industry associations. The MSSO then provides international support to MedDRA users by administration of the licenses, training offers like the one we have today, user group meetings, etc., but also maintains and further develops the terminology based on user feedback. Its partner organization is the Japanese Maintenance Organization, or JMO, that takes care of the Japanese language MedDRA and of the support of the Japanese MedDRA users. And as mentioned before, all these MSSO activities are overseen by the MedDRA Management Committee. Here it is further specified where and in which areas MedDRA is used. It is used throughout the whole product development process, from phase 1 to phase 3, for new drug applications, and after approval in phase 4 studies and in pharmacovigilance activities. Please note that preclinical data are not within the scope of MedDRA. MedDRA is not only used in industry databases, but also in regulatory databases. It is used in a number of documents like ICSRs and safety summary reports, in clinical study reports, investigators' brochures, for compiling company core safety information, in marketing applications, publications, when summarizing safety information, in prescribing information, and in some countries, like in the US, also for advertising purposes, like in TV commercials. Are there any questions so far, Leander?
No questions at this time. Thank you, Caroline.
Okay. So then let's move on and talk about MedDRA scope, structure, and characteristics. And this is a key slide that shows what is in the scope of MedDRA, or what type of medical terms is covered by MedDRA. So in the blue circle, you will find all medical terms and conditions that are within its scope. It incorporates terms for medical conditions like diagnosis and clinical signs and symptoms, pharmacogenetic terms, terms for indications for use, investigational tests and results, medical and surgical procedures, terms for the medical, social, and family history of patients, toxicologic issues, as well as product quality issues and device-related issues. Last but not least, the scope of MedDRA also includes the standardized MedDRA queries that are used for data retrieval purposes, and in addition, terms for medication errors. And other product use issues were added in the last few years based on requests by regulators. On the other hand, MedDRA excludes terms that relate to frequencies unless such information is medically relevant, like frequent micturition or frequent bowel movements. The same holds true for indicators of severity. You will only find a few of them on PT level where clear medical definitions exist for the characterization of the condition, like in the case of PT severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. You will not find any numerical values for investigational results, but qualifiers like normal, abnormal, increased or decreased, positive or negative. Also, patient demographic terms related to race, gender, age, etc. are excluded, with the exception again of terms where the information regarding age or gender is relevant based on medical considerations, like for instance when it comes to male or female infertility, male or female breast cancer, senile dementia, infantile acne, or neonatal jaundice. So here you would find specific terms that include demographic information, but you won't find them for each and every medical condition. MedDRA is not a drug dictionary, nor is it a medical equipment, device, or diagnostic product dictionary. So you won't find any brand names in the terminology, but there are several terms that include generic drug names, like for instance, the PT thalidomide embryopathy. And you won't find brand names of devices, but terms for specific device types like catheters, joint prosthesis, cardiac pacemakers, etc. And finally, MedDRA does not contain any terms that refer to clinical trial study design, like double-blind, placebo-controlled, etc. So it's really very important to understand what is in the scope of MedDRA and what is out of scope. We now come to the structure of MedDRA, and we will look into how MedDRA is organized. I told you earlier that MedDRA is not a dictionary actually, but a terminology that is organized in a defined way. So MedDRA has a systematic 5-level hierarchical structure, starting with a system organ class or SOC on the top, and the high-level group term or HLTs underneath, that then group the high-level terms or HLTs. And under these HLTs, you will find the preferred terms or PTs. They represent the medical concept level. The PT level is used for data retrieval, presentation, and analysis purposes. And the PTs then group the lowest level terms, or LLTs, that are used for data entry and operational coding. And you can see that starting from the top, MedDRA gets more and more granular and more specific. So that is from 27 system organ classes to more than 88,000 LLTs. So for coding purposes, you would browse MedDRA to find the most specific and most accurate LLT for the reported patient information among these more than 88,000 LLTs. Please note that only British English is used at the PT level and above. So here only British English is used. It is only on the LLT level where you would find terms in American English. So if you would look for a specific PT, for instance, and use American English for your search in the browser, you may run into problems and not find suitable results. Here we have the 27 system organ classes. Some of them group terms based on their manifestation site, like the SOC blood and lymphatic system disorders, or eye disorders, or musculoskeletal and connective tissue disorders, or renal, urinary disorders, or vascular disorders. Other SOCs group terms based on the etiology of the respective conditions, like for instance, the SOC congenital, familiar and genetic disorders, or immune system disorders, or infections and infestations, or metabolism and nutrition disorders, or neoplasm disorders. The SOC product issues that you can see here groups terms that relate to product quality issues. So it's a very specific system organ class. And the same holds true for the SOC social circumstances. It contains terms that describe the social context of patients, like lifestyle issues, family issues. So terms from this system organ class should normally not be used for coding adverse events, rather from the medical history of patients. And the SOC surgical and medical procedures and the SOC investigations group terms based on their purpose. So you will have to have a good knowledge about the system organ classes and their content in order to get a better feel on where to search in the MedDRA hierarchy to find a specific medical concept or term. Let's look at an example for the MedDRA hierarchy, in this instance in SOC cardiac disorders. Under this SOC, you will find 10 HLGTs, representing the main types of cardiac disorders. And here we have selected HLGT cardiac arrhythmias. Under this HLGT, there are several HLTs grouping PTs for the different types of arrhythmias, like supraventricular arrhythmias, ventricular arrhythmias, etc. The HLT shown on this slide is HLT rate and rhythm disorders, NEC. NEC standing for not elsewhere classified. NEC groupings are only found on HLGT or HLT level. They represent miscellaneous groupings of terms that do not fit into any other HLT or HLGT. One of the PTs under this HLT is the PT arrhythmia that groups a number of LLTs that are not all shown on the slide. LLTs represent synonyms, quasi-synonyms, or lexical variants of the PT term, and also colloquial, patient-friendly terms. The LLT level here is the data entry level, and the granularity on the LLT level provides guidance to medical coders and is thereby facilitating accurate coding. And please note that each LLT is only linked to one PT. Now let's look at the LLTs shown on the slide under PT arrhythmia. Arrhythmia NOS stands for arrhythmia not otherwise specified. It doesn't make a lot of difference whether you select arrhythmia NOS or LLT arrhythmia, but it is really good practice only using the NOS terms when it is explicitly reported that a given condition could not be further specified. So if just arrhythmia is reported without any further information, it would be good practice to select LLT arrhythmia and not to assume that it is not otherwise specified. LLT dysrhythmias represents a synonym for arrhythmia, and some of the LLTs in the terminologies are labeled non-current, like this one here, other specified cardiac dysrhythmias. It is marked in red, and this is also how the non-current terms are highlighted in the MedDRA browser. So what are non-current terms? They can only be found on the LLT level. LLTs are not set are set non-current when identified as ambiguous or truncated or misspelled, or when not following MedDRA rules, for instance in the case of combination terms. They are flagged and should not be used for ongoing coding, but they are not removed from the terminology in order to preserve the information from legacy cases. So if you have logged a clinical database in a previous MedDRA version, you would still be able to find these terms in the latest MedDRA version, although they were made non-current, and could map them to another suitable LLT. An example for a non-current LLT is the CoSTAR term nausea and vomiting, representing a combination term that is represented by two separate MedDRA PTs. It has the non-current status and is grouped under PT vomiting. Another example would be the ambiguous term angina, a term that is most frequently used to describe angina pectoris, but that may also relate to angina tonsillaris, of course. Each MedDRA term is assigned an 8-digit numeric code. The codes are assigned sequentially and are not expressive, so you cannot predict or deduct where a specific MedDRA term would be located in the MedDRA hierarchy based on its numeric code. Codes are used in databases and are relevant for electronic submissions, but they are also very helpful when it comes to translations. You may know that MedDRA is a multi-language terminology, and it is currently available in 21 languages, and these are highlighted in blue on this slide. Estonian and Finnish are the latest ones that were released with version 26.1. So many of the newer European translations are to support the Electronic Prescribing Information Initiative of the European Medicines Agency. We are working on 6 additional translations, highlighted in orange, namely Icelandic, Croatian, Lithuanian, Maltese, Norwegian, and Slovenian. And the 4 translations which are not highlighted here, Bulgarian, Danish, Romanian, and Slovak, they will become available at a later time point. What is important to know is that the same concepts have the same code in all MedDRA translations. In the center, you can see the numerical code for the medical concept headache and its respective translations here. In all translations, the concept headache will have the same numeric code. So this feature is very useful for communication in all languages and for the translation of safety information for local labeling purposes, etc. Another feature of the MedDRA structure, besides the hierarchy, is its multi-axiality, allowing for presentation of PTs in multiple system organ classes based on medical considerations. So what is meant by that? Let's take the example of the PT dyspnea, representing the medical concept of shortness of breath. If I would ask you in what SOC you would expect this PT to be in, some of you may say in SOC respiratory, based on its manifestation site, but others may say in SOC cardiac disorders because dyspnea is an important symptom of cardiac disease. And both of you are right, and you will find PT dyspnea under both system organ classes, one based on manifestation site, but also based on the etiology of the condition. This allows for data presentation and analysis based on different medical considerations depending on your area of interest and also product-specific considerations. In order to achieve, again, standardization for cumulative data output of MedDRA-coded data, all PTs with multiple SOC linkages need to have a default or primary SOC assignment. And this primary SOC assignment will determine which SOC represents the multi-axial PT during cumulative data output and presentation for integrated safety summaries, periodic safety reporting, etc. The primary SOC is defined by MedDRA. This feature prevents double counting of events as a respiratory or cardiac condition, as in our previous example of PT dyspnea. And the standardization that is achieved by the primary SOC presentation of data is required by regulators as well and has to be followed. Deliberate changes, even if a database allows for it, will not be accepted. So usually the primary SOC assignment is hard-coded in the coding systems, but if you have a system that allows you to choose, you must always select the primary SOC that is defined by MedDRA. Let's look at the rules that are applied for the primary SOC assignment within MedDRA. If the respective PT has only one SOC linkage, obviously this SOC is automatically its primary system organ class. PTs for diseases or clinical signs and symptoms have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. But there are three exceptions. Firstly, congenital terms and hereditary conditions always have the SOC congenital as primary SOC, independent of manifestation site. Secondly, neoplasms or neoplasm terms always have SOC neoplasms as primary SOC, with the exception of cysts and polyps, which have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. And thirdly, infection and infestation terms always have SOC infections as primary SOC. Again, most PTs are grouped based on their manifestation site, with the exception of these three system organ classes: congenital, neoplasms, and infections. Let's look at an example for multi-axiality using the PT obesity cardiomyopathy. Here it is. It has SOC cardiac disorders as primary system organ class based on its manifestation site, but also a secondary linkage to SOC metabolism and nutrition disorders to represent the etiology of the condition. Please note that a PT can have any number of secondary linkages, not just one or two. Especially in SOC congenital, there are PTs that represent really very complex congenital anomalies affecting multiple body sites. And they may have up to 7 secondary SOC linkages, like, for example, the PT charge syndrome. All these additional linkages are called secondary. They are all equal. There is no ranking among them. Here, another example. We are looking at the PT influenza. It has SOC infections as primary SOC and a secondary linkage to the site of manifestation that is SOC respiratory. This is now one of the exception SOCs I have shown before. Remember, these are SOC congenital, SOC neoplasms, and also SOC infections. But generally, the PTs are assigned the primary SOC based on the site of manifestation. Next question for you. Which of these concepts can be coded using MedDRA? Remember what you saw on the scope of MedDRA slide. What is in the scope of MedDRA and what is out of scope. Let's see what we see here. wheelchair user, expired product administered, breast cancer female, breast sounds normal, Hispanic would be demographic information, so most of you are voting for breast cancer female, device contamination prior to use, the medication error term, breast sounds normal, wheelchair users as well. So grade 4 adverse drug reaction, this contains the severity descriptor. Grade 4, grade 3, grade 2, you won't find in MedDRA. So these would be excluded. X-ray machine doesn't tell you anything. So if it was a diagnostic X-ray of the lung or X-ray of the urinary tract whatsoever, that would be an acceptable term in MedDRA, but not just X-ray machine. It's just a machine. Remember that I told you that MedDRA is not the terminology that includes device terms. Hispanic is demographic information that doesn't tell much, so this would not be included. Device contamination prior to use, yes, that's a medication error term. Wheelchair user is a social circumstance. And here it was a Voltaren-induced gastritis. Voltaren is a brand name, so you won't find it. You may find other terms, more general terms for specific classes of drugs, but no brand names. So again, this would not be acceptable for MedDRA. So always important, especially when you are thinking about change request, submission of change request, to have in mind what is accepted, what is included in MedDRA, and what is out of scope of MedDRA. Next one, is this statement true or false? Each LLT is linked to only one PT. True or false? I see you voting. Let's see what you're going for. It's really 50-50, more or less. So let me close the poll. So each LLT is really only linked to one PT. There is no multi-axiality on the LLT level. Multi-axiality starts at the PT level. Really important to remember. An LLT is only linked to one PT. Multi-axiality starts at the PT level, HLT level, or HLGT level, but it's never, no LLT is multi-axial. Important to remember. And what about the next statement? True or false? Each PT is linked to only one HLT. True or false? Remember the hierarchies that I've shown you before. PT influenza, for instance. Again, let us. False. Yes, most of you are voting for false, and this is absolutely right. Of course, PTs can be nearly 60% of the PTs are multi-axial, by the way. So many of those are multi-axial, but multi-axiality in the hierarchy can also start at HLT or HLGT level. And which of these LLTs do you think are non-current in MedDRA? And here more than one answer may be correct. MI, insomnia with sleep apnea, bloody drainage, and or abdo bloating. Remember what I've shown you earlier, which type of terms are set non-current, those with spelling errors, those that are ambiguous, truncated, combination terms, etc. Most of you are going for MI, abdominal bloating. Yes, it's a truncated term, but more than 50% are also voting for insomnia with sleep apnea, and some of you also vote for bloody drainage, so more or less all of them. Let me close it. Yes, myocardial infarction is an ambiguous abbreviation, although it's often used to represent myocardial infarction, MI. It can only also refer to mesenteric ischemia, mitral insufficiency, even mental illness. So it's an ambiguous abbreviation. Insomnia with sleep apnea is represented by two separate PTs in MedDRA, so it's a combination term. It has also a non-current status. And bloody drainage. Drainage could be a surgical procedural term referring to the systematic withdrawal of fluids, or a non-surgical term referring to discharge and secretion used for excretion of liquids from the body. So again, an ambiguous term. And abdo bloating is a truncated term, does not fulfill the naming conventions in MedDRA, so it's also, all of them have a non-current status. And in which SOCs would you expect to find the PT cerebrovascular accident? Cerebrovascular accident, based on manifestation site and based on the etiology of the condition. So which organ system is causing the cerebrovascular accident? So nervous system disorders would represent the manifestation site of the cerebrovascular accident. And of course, it could be a bleeding, it could be a thrombosis, it could be an embolism. So it's caused by the vascular system. It's caused by the vascular system. You're going broader, and say, well, it could be the blood with a thrombosis causing it, or a cardiac disorder with an embolism. But here in this instance, it's simpler. So the primary SOC is nervous system disorders representing the manifestation site, and the secondary linkage is to SOC vascular disorders representing the etiology of the condition. And what about this PT? In which SOCs would you expect to find colon cancer? Colon cancer. Yes, the primary SOC would be neoplasm. Remember, this would be one of the exception SOCs. Colon cancer, of course, represents a neoplasm, so primary SOC would be neoplasms. And the manifestation site, of course, colon cancer would be gastrointestinal. And therefore, the secondary linkage is to gastrointestinal disorders. Most of you got it right. Any questions for this part of the presentation, Leander?
Thank you, Caroline. Currently, there are no questions. Thank you.
Okay. So then, just to let you know, this training will not be able to provide you, of course, with all details of MedDRA definitions and specifics. And to better understand MedDRA, please refer to the MedDRA Introductory Guide. This document is available in many of the MedDRA languages and is updated with each MedDRA version. It describes specific MedDRA rules and conventions, as well as MedDRA naming conventions that are relevant to better understand MedDRA classifications. For example, per convention, the abdominal wall is considered a gastrointestinal structure, and the pharynx and diaphragm are considered respiratory structures. So that's why all pharynx terms and diaphragm terms have their primary SOC and SOC respiratory. So I would highly recommend to study this document thoroughly, especially for beginners or less experienced MedDRA users. It is really helpful, and I'm sure that you will find it useful. So let me quickly show you where to find this document now. And here we are. This is the MedDRA website. And if you click on how to use and support documentation, a new page will open. And here we are, MedDRA version 27.0. It's the latest version. If I click on this little arrow here, here is the MedDRA introductory guide. And for the next topic that we will address today, the standardized MedDRA queries, you see that there is also an introductory guide for standardized MedDRA query and a what's new document that nicely summarizes the changes that were made or implemented in this new MedDRA version as compared to the previous version. So this is where you can find the introductory guide. And if I open the document, here it is. You see the inclusion-exclusion criteria that are applied. Let me go to the table of content here. Here we are. Scope of the terminology, inclusion of terms, exclusion criteria, the structure, equivalence hierarchy. Then the levels are explained. Spelling conventions, how to deal with abbreviations, body side considerations. And here we are, abdominal wall, cardiac and vascular, chest wall is classified as a musculoskeletal structure. The eyelid is classified as a structure of the eye. That's why all eyelid conditions have their primary SOC and SOC eye disorders. So really useful information that you can find in this document. Let me switch back to my presentation. So next we will now talk about the maintenance of the terminology. MedDRA has to be maintained in order to keep up to date with medical science and also to meet the expectations of users in both regulatory agencies, pharmaceutical industry, etc. The maintenance of MedDRA is mainly triggered by the MedDRA users who can send up to 100 change requests per month to the MSSO for consideration. For example, you may think that a primary SOC assignment of a PT is not appropriate, considering the MedDRA rules, of course. As mentioned before, you should not change the primary SOC assignment in your database, but you have the option to submit a respective change request. You will get a response from the MSSO within 7 to 10 working days when submitting proposals for simple changes, so changes that affect the LLT and PT level only. Complex changes above the LLT and PT level will be posted mid-year for discussion in the user community, and based on the user feedback, the final decision will be taken by the MSSO. There are 2 releases of new MedDRA versions per year. One that includes complex changes, so those above the PT level. And this is the complex or major version release and takes place on the 1st of March each year. And a simple release that takes place on September 1st each year. And this simple release only will affect the LLT and PT level. So the latest release was version 27.0 and was a complex release. For the submission of change requests, the MSSO has developed a web-based tool called WebCR. The slide provides you with the URL here, but you will also find the link within the support section of the MedDRA website on the change request information page, together with a detailed user guide on how to use it. The tool was updated and now has an improved, more user-friendly interface. And please note that change requests must be submitted in English language. You have the option to submit change requests for MedDRA terms and SMQs, and also change requests for the translations. When submitting a single change request or a batch of them, you will get an immediate confirmation from the tool that you have submitted this request or these requests. The tool allows users to check the change request history back to version 5.1. And this is really helpful before submitting any change request that you may consider. Because other users may have submitted the same request you are considering before already, and it may have been accepted. So if so, you would not have to submit the request again and you would save time. But it may also have been rejected, and you will be able to review the rationale for the rejection, and then afterwards you can decide whether a resubmission would make sense or not. Here a screenshot of the new WebCR platform landing page. In order to access the tool, you will need your user ID and password, and the tool guides users to enter all required information. This slide shows an example of the user interface for submission of a request for a new LLT. Here, add a new term, add a new LLT. There's a drop-down list here. So here we have selected add a new LLT. Then you would enter the proposed LLT. You could propose the PT that this LLT should be linked to, but this is optional. But what is mandatory is to provide a rationale for your request. And so this justification is always needed, best with supporting documentation provided either as an attachment or by providing links. In addition to single change requests, there may be more systematic issues affecting multiple LLTs and/or PTs that you would like to address with the MSSO. For example, MedDRA terms that represent similar conditions like inflammation, for instance, at different body sites may have been handled inconsistently over time. The MSSO does proactive changes internally when needed, but such changes may also be suggested by MedDRA users. They are to be sent not via the WebCR tool, but to the MSSO help desk with a respective corresponding justification again. As an example, you can see a proactive request that was actually provided by myself when still working in pharmaceutical industry, asking for the review of the placement of bruising and contusion terms. Reason was that some LLTs containing the information bruise or bruising or contusion were linked to PTs representing injury for the affected organ or site, losing the hemorrhage information on PT level. As an example, the LLT renal contusion was linked to PT renal injury in an earlier version of MedDRA. And because data retrieval and analysis is performed on the PT level, such placements could lead to missing relevant cases when looking for bleeding events, of course. Please note that for this type of request, MSSO will need more time to come to a final conclusion. But I would really like to encourage you to submit change requests and to contribute to the maintenance of MedDRA, because it ensures that it is really up to date to the current status of science. It takes time, yes, and effort, but this effort will keep the terminology up to date and make it most useful for the MedDRA community. Now, which of the following terms could be considered for addition to MedDRA? Remember again the slide addressing the scope of MedDRA I've shown earlier. What is included and what type of terms are not considered for inclusion? Drug-induced weight gain, mild diarrhea, severity indicator here, AF, an abbreviation. Is it unambiguous? Is it ambiguous? And then we have precancerous oral lesion and glucose above 100 milligram per deciliter, so numerical value. What do you think? So most of you are going for precancerous oral lesion, but some of you would also go for drug-induced weight gain. So mild diarrhea contains a severity indicator. You wouldn't add this. So if we would add all severity indicators to all medical conditions, this would really overload the terminology. Same holds true for the numerical values, but no one has voted for the numerical values. Same, but drug-induced. Drug-induced could be anything. You could add drug-induced to nearly all terms in MedDRA. So relationship to the drug is captured in separate database fields. So this is not needed, would not be accepted. Mild diarrhea would not be accepted because it contains a severity descriptor. Again, severity of an adverse event is captured in separate database fields. AF is an ambiguous abbreviation, could relate to atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter. Glucose above 100, you all heard that numerical values are excluded. MedDRA only contains qualifiers like increased, decreased, high, low, etc. But precancerous oral lesion, most of you have voted for this one. This is a term that could be accepted for inclusion, for addition to MedDRA. Well done. Any questions so far?
We've had a couple of questions, Caroline. One is, can I please confirm, does the analysis take place at the PT level?
Yes, mostly. Mostly analysis, also data presentation, cumulative data output and data presentation is taking place on PT level. There's only few exceptions. If you are interested in specific devices, you may have to refer to the LLT level for data analysis. And also if you are interested, so if one of the products in your product portfolio is an antibiotic and you are interested in specific infectious agents, not just the family, but very specific subgroups in this family, this can only be found on LLT level. And there also you may have to refer to the LLT level. But otherwise, in the vast majority, data retrieval, data analysis takes place on the PT level.
Thank you, Caroline. And we have another one that if a reporter has reported an event of angioedema, additionally, it also states that the patient experienced throat closing up, throat swelling, shortness of breath. The primary SOC for angioedema is skin and subcutaneous tissue disorder, but the correct SOC would be respiratory. Can we code with the secondary SOC? Sorry, it's a long question, and I probably pronounce things slightly wrong.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's so angioedema can, of course, often affect the subcutaneous tissue. So it's not always only a respiratory condition. You can have swelling of the whole face, of the lips, etc. It's correctly represented in MedDRA. And how to code this? I can only refer to the Coding Basics webinar because there you will hear about specific rules how to code a diagnosis with signs and symptoms. But because here angioedema would be the diagnosis and the closing of the throat would be the sign and symptom of the diagnosis. And there are specific rules that you can apply for coding these terms. But this is too detailed for today to go into more details now.
Thank you, Caroline, and that's all the questions to read out for now. Thank you.
So let's continue then. In the context of MedDRA content and versioning, I would also like to address related MedDRA tools like the MedDRA browsers and the MedDRA version analysis tool, or MVAT. They are free to use by all MedDRA subscribers, and I will introduce and demonstrate some of their functionalities in the next few slides. The MedDRA browsers are used to browse the terminology in order to find suitable terms for coding or suitable standardized MedDRA queries for data retrieval purposes. Out of the 3 MedDRA browsers that are provided by the MSSO, one is intended to be installed on local computers, and 2 are accessible via the internet. The mobile MedDRA browser for smartphones and tablet computers, and the MedDRA web-based browser for laptops or desktop computers. The desktop browser can be downloaded from the MedDRA website together with the release files and makes you independent from internet access. So this may be helpful in some instances. All 3 browsers require the entry of the MedDRA ID of your organization and a password. They support viewing MedDRA and the SMQs and related searches in all MedDRA languages. They also have a language-specific interface, and the desktop browser and the web-based browser have the ability to export search results to a local file system. But this is only relevant if you are working in the data retrieval area. This functionality is addressed in the 2 webinars, and the first webinar that relates to data retrieval and analysis of MedDRA coded data. For coding purposes, the view of the primary and secondary link information and the advanced search options are very helpful to make your searches more focused and efficient, and I will show you in a minute. Some other features of the browsers mainly support data retrieval and analysis, like the one upload terms to run against SMQs. And if you are considering the submission of a change request to the MSSO and would like to see whether another MedDRA user has already submitted such a request, then also you can use the supplemental view of the browser. That is really helpful to see whether such a request was already accepted. And again, I will show you in a minute. Here, a screenshot of the user interface of the web-based browser. And now let me switch screens to show you some of the functionalities here. So here we are on the MedDRA website, and here you have a shortcut to the web-based browser. If I click on it, it will open. It autofills my MedDRA ID and my password, and then I can log in. And here we are. This is the user interface, and we will focus on the coding part using the SOC view, and we will address the SMQ view later on if time allows today. On the top of the screen, you'll find configuration options and links to useful information. So first of all, the legends. A PT, a blue square around a PT, shows a multi-axial PT that you're looking at in its primary SOC. Green square around a PT, again, multi-axial PT that you're looking at in its secondary SOC. Red square means it's a single axial, uniaxial primary term. Blue square around a SOC name indicates the primary SOC for a given MedDRA term, and here again the non-current LLT term in red lettering with a red square around it. So important to remember to better understand what the search results that you are looking at. Then you can open a new browser window, so to compare 2 versions of MedDRA, for instance. Here you have a direct link to the MedDRA documentation I've shown you earlier, where to find the introductory guide. Here we are, same as I've shown you before. Here you would find the introductory guide and the introductory guide for the standardized MedDRA queries, and also the points to consider documents that we will address later on, and a very detailed user guide. You have the option to show or not show non-current LLTs. I have this activated. You can also show the codes. If you click on it, you see that also the SOCs have their numeric code. Here they are, but I will deactivate it because it makes the screen more, too busy. In the left lower corner here, you can explore the full MedDRA hierarchy for all 27 SOCs, from blood and lymphatic system disorders down to vascular disorders. And you can do so by clicking on this little plus sign here. Then you see all the HLDTs that are grouped under SOC blood and lymphatic system disorders. And if you click on one of the plus signs again, you can see the HLTs, the PTs, and if you click on the PT, then you see the LLTs underneath. So this is how you can explore the hierarchy. The Explore window allows to perform what we call top-down searches. So let's assume, let me first collapse everything again. So let's assume that we are looking for a MedDRA term for a reported diagnosis, insufficient kidney function. Insufficient kidney function. So based on the affected organ system, we would explore SOC renal. So let me click on it. And the most promising HLGT here is the HLGT renal disorders, excluding nephropathies. And under this HLGT, we see the HLT renal failure and impairment. And if I click on it, I now see the color coding for the PTs. Red square, uniaxial term, blue square, multi-axial, looking at in its primary SOC, green square, multi-axial PT, looking at it in its secondary SOC. So we were looking for an unspecified renal insufficient kidney function. So a renal failure, here we are. We have very specific ones, renal failure neonatal, we have the pre-renal failure, post-renal failure. Our condition was vaguely reported, so let's look for a suitable term under renal failure. And here we have a non-current LLT, renal failure following abortion and ectopic and molar pregnancies. Of course, this is a combination term that is represented by separate MedDRA PTs, and that's why this combination term was made non-current. So we had insufficient renal function. So insufficiency in renal or renal insufficiency, two lexical variants would be useful for would be closest to our verbatim. So let's choose insufficiency renal. If I click on this term, a new window opens here, the term details window, and you see the MedDRA code, you see the MedDRA term, and you can also see the SMQs. This LLT is grouped in, so acute renal failure, anaphylactoid shock conditions, etc., etc. And you see the hierarchy, and you see that this PT, it has a red circle around it, is single axial, so only has a link to renal and urinary disorders SOC. As I told you before, it's really useful to see all the PTs grouped under an HLT, independent of the fact whether they only have a secondary linkage, because this way you have a complete overview on all relevant PTs that are included in MedDRA. If you would only have the option to look at the single axial or multi-axial PTs that have a primary link to the renal disorders, excluding nephropathies, HLGT, then you would have to search in other system organ classes as well in order to make sure that you find the most appropriate PT and LLT for your search. So that's why this this feature of the browser is so important and helpful, that you can see all the PTs independent of primary and secondary SOC assignment. So this was the top-down search. You have another option to make your search, to perform searches, and this is to use the search window in the middle of the screen. So if I would now enter kidney and the word stem insufficiency, in order to capture or cover both insufficiency and insufficient. So it's always good to keep your search broad, to use word stems, to not be too specific in your search. And now I click search. And here I have my, one of them is, you see, this is a non-current term because of a spelling error, insufficiency. There's some letters are missing here. And here we have pre-renal whatsoever, but also our insufficiency renal and renal insufficiency. These are the two LLTs that we saw before when doing our top-down search. So we see that kidney was replaced by renal, and this is done by the tool itself by using a synonym list. So it replaces cardiac with heart, renal by kidney, liver by hepatic, for instance. So always very useful to keep this activated here. Also ignore diacritical marks, show PT-LLTs with categories. So these are useful features of the tool that should always be activated. So this is what you can do in the search field. If I now click on our renal insufficient renal, right mouse click, there's other options. I can say go to browser. I see the hierarchy here, and here we are. It will then show you the respective LLT in the full hierarchy. So this allows you to search for other, even more specific PTs. You may know that it's a neonate the report is referring to. So you could now look for a neonatal term. Here it is, renal failure neonatal. So this is a really helpful feature to make sure that you have really selected the most specific, the most accurate LLT and PT for the reported event. What else can you do? You can also say open history, and it will show you the history of the term. It was added in the first MedDRA version that was released, insufficiency renal, here you see, but the PT name has changed, latest in versions 7.1. But since then, the hierarchy of this LLT is stable. So this is also sometimes useful to check the history here. And you can also copy the term, copy the code to paste it in some document, or print your search results here, the whole list. So these are all features of the browser. Now, if you look at the list that we get here, you will see that many of the terms are referring to adrenal insufficiency. So, of course, we were only interested in kidney insufficiency, renal insufficiency. So this makes our list quite long. And here now the advanced search comes into play. If I enter kidney again, kidney insufficiency, and select does not contain adrenal, and search again, then I have a much shorter list that is only referring to the renal conditions. Pre-renal insufficiency, post-renal, acute, chronic, terminal. So these are the terms that we are really interested in. So very helpful tool. For instance, if we would look for the MI, if you would have a reported MI and you are not sure whether this is an ambiguous abbreviation, yes or not, you could say exact match MI and search. And there it is. Exact match MI, and you immediately see it's non-current. So let me switch back to the basic search. And what you can also do is to restrict your search to one specific SOCs or to a list of SOCs, like investigations, for instance. So if we would be interested in renal function parameters, for instance, in SOC investigations, we could search for it only in investigations. And here we are, then I can use the right mouse click, say go to browser, and it will bring me directly to the HLGT. Here we are, renal and urinary tract investigations and urine analysis. And here are the renal function analysis, PTs, long list. Very easy to find them by restricting your search to a specific SOC. Now, what about the supplemental view? Last functionality I want to show you. Let's suppose that you are warned here, SOCs are limited in the search to one SOC, so I have to clear my selection. If I would be interested in an adrenal antibody, so I have a report about an adrenal antibody, and I would search for it, I wouldn't find anything. Something that is similar, but it's not referring to an adrenal antibody. So what can I do now? I could consider a change request, to submit a change request, but what I can do first is to select this supplemental view, and the screen changes in color to show you that you are not looking into the latest released version of MedDRA, but you are looking into the next upcoming release of MedDRA, the current status of version 27.1 that is not yet released, but is of course in the works. And if I now enter my search again, antibody, here it is, and search, I have the adrenal antibody test negative, adrenal antibody test positive. So here they are, separate PTs, of course, and I can again do right mouse click, go to browser, and I see these terms in the hierarchy under HLT autoimmunity analysis. So very helpful to look for specific terms that you cannot find in the current MedDRA version. Before you submit a change request, check in the supplemental view if such a term was already accepted for the next MedDRA version release. So this was a brief overview. Let me switch back to and continue. So in addition to the browsers, MSSO offers another tool to all MedDRA license holders, the MedDRA version analysis tool, or MVAT. The MVAT is a web-based tool again that you can access via this URL, and you again need your user ID and password in order to access it. So let me shortly summarize its functionalities. The first feature listed on the slide is the generation of version reports, comparing any two versions of MedDRA. So when a clinical trial is run over 5 years and you have used the starting version throughout the clinical trial, you can compare this starting version with the newest MedDRA version in order to get an idea of what has changed in between. And this feature also provides the option to include secondary SOC information. The second feature of the tool is the identification of changes in a specific data set that you can upload into the tool that you have already coded. Up to 100,000 rows can be uploaded, meaning the LLTs and/or PTs that were assigned to your verbatims. The tool will then show you the changes to those MedDRA terms between the version that was used to code the data and any MedDRA version that you define. These may be changes in the hierarchy, or it could be that an LLT was made non-current, etc. Again, you can include secondary SOC information if important for your retrieval purpose, but please note that there is one gap that you shouldn't be aware of. What you are uploading are codes, MedDRA terms. MVAT has no auto-coding feature and will not identify better terms for your verbatims that became available with new MedDRA versions. This would still have to be done manually. And please also note that there are no confidentiality issues when loading your own data into the tool. The loaded data stay in your computer and they are not stored after you close the MVAT session. And the third and last feature of MVAT helps identifying changes to a single individual MedDRA term or code, which may be relevant for the safety profile of one of your medicinal products, for instance, something that can also be retrieved by the term history function of the MedDRA browsers I've shown you before. Last but not least, the user interface and the report output of MVAT is available in all released MedDRA languages, and MVAT also offers the ability to run reports on supplemental changes and secondary SOC changes. This is how the user interface of MVAT looks like. Here you would make a comparison between version 26.1 and version 27.0 and run the report, which will provide you with a table that will then show what kind of changes were implemented in the terminology between these two versions. Time today does not allow for a more detailed MVAT demonstration, but if you are interested, there is very useful detailed information about the MVAT features on the MedDRA website under the header Training, Training Material, and Tools. Any questions related to the tools, Leander?
We had one that was asking, is it possible to demonstrate the results of searching by PT and not by LLT? But I don't know whether you want to try that at the end if we have time, or do it now.
It's just, let me switch back to the released version. So this you can do here. So if you are only looking for PTs, and search, then you only find the PT hits. Okay?
That's great, Caroline. And whilst you're on the demos, would you mind just showing again where to access the MVAT on the web page, if that's possible?
Yes. So here, so the MVAT, how to use, tools, and here's the MVAT. You would click on the MVAT, and then you can open it here, and you also have a direct link to the training materials that are available for MVAT.
Very helpful. Thanks very much, Caroline. No other questions.
Okay, then we will now cover some basics of coding with MedDRA, but really only the basics. I've just referred you to the other two webinars that we offer that more specifically demonstrate different rules that are to be applied for MedDRA coding. First, let me explain what is meant by the term coding conventions. Generally speaking, coding conventions are written guidelines for coding with MedDRA in your organization. It is crucial to have them not only for your operational tasks, but also for inspection readiness, because inspectors ask for them and you should have them available in writing to show that all medical coders are doing their job based on defined conventions. They may address topics like handling of misspellings, abbreviations, or acronyms. Another area you may want to cover are combination terms and two combinations of medical concepts. If you want to split them, how to prioritize this information. There may also be terms that you would always like to query, like for example, chest pain, to find out whether it is of cardiac origin or caused by other non-cardiac events, like for example, pulmonary embolism. But you may also want to query reports for unspecified infarctions, necrosis, occlusion, etc., in order to find out the affected anatomical structure, because these terms are available in MedDRA. Unspecified infarction, necrosis, occlusion. And you may not want that coders use these terms without trying to find out or to get more information to further specify where this infarction or necrosis took place. You may now ask yourself why such detailed instructions are actually needed. Well, first of all, coders may have a very different background, and they may need guidance how to handle very specific medical terms within MedDRA. Of course, always with the goal to achieve accurate and consistent coding output. Also, MedDRA is very large and nearly always provides a variety of coding options as compared to previous legacy terminologies. So coders need more guidance on how to prioritize and handle these options in order to achieve coding consistency, especially when they are working in different functions and in different geographical regions. And you may have the need for more specific coding rules for certain medical areas based on your own product portfolio. It is often assumed that autocoders could look for look for a match between a verbatim and an LLT would solve all these problems. But of course, unfortunately, this is not the case. Even with a sophisticated autocoding algorithm and lots of testing, autocoders will never cover all verbatims. So manual coding will still be needed, and autocoding results also will always have to be QC'd by qualified individuals, first of all with good medical background, but also sound MedDRA knowledge to also ensure autocoding accuracy, because autocoders also make mistakes, not only humans. Ideally, all MedDRA users should use the same basic set of rules for their coding. Remember that when talking about MedDRA, we are talking about standardization. And ICH took the initiative here and implemented the so-called M1 working group, or Points to Consider working group, with members from industry and regulators, as well as from the MSSO and JMO and the WHO as an observer. This group now has compiled a Points to Consider document called MedDRA Term Selection Points to Consider. And this M1 working group is of course also further maintaining this document. Here a snapshot of the cover page of the current ICH PTC document for MedDRA term selection for version 27.0. It provides guidance and many examples on how to perform accurate term selection using MedDRA. And this guidance should be the basis for any in-house coding conventions and coding decisions within the different organizations of all MedDRA users. And thereby, of course, this document promotes overall coding consistency and also facilitates common understanding when sharing clinical data. If you don't have in-house coding conventions, you may, of course, also use this PTC document as coding conventions or as the basis for your coding convention within your organization. You may add some product-specific options, but you can use this and just adapt it based on your needs. The document is updated with each major MedDRA version release. That means beginning of March each year. What is important to know is that the original and comprehensive versions of the PTC document are currently available in English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and Russian. In addition, there are condensed versions of these comprehensive documents in some of the other MedDRA languages, except those, of course, where we have the full versions. And these condensed versions focus on more general coding or data retrieval and presentation principles without going into further details for selected topics. And because they are only focusing on the general principles that do not change too much over the years, these are not updated on a yearly basis, but on an as-needed basis. These condensed versions are available in the languages that you can see down here: Arabic, Brazilian Portuguese, Czech, Dutch, French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Portuguese. This table provides a summary of the available ICH guidance documents. So here is the MedDRA term selection points to consider for term selection, so coding guidance. So here is the comprehensive version updated annually with the March release of MedDRA. Then the condensed versions in the MedDRA languages they are available in. You see them here, updated as needed. And you see that the same working group, the M1 working group, also provides a PTC document for data retrieval and presentation. And it's called MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation Points to Consider. And similar to what we saw before, this document is provided in a comprehensive version in the same languages we saw before, and this is updated annually. And then we have the shorter versions, the condensed versions, that only focus on the general retrieval and analysis principles in some other MedDRA languages, and you see them here, and updated. These are updated as needed. For the coding area, the responsible ICH working group also provides a so-called companion document, and this document provides even more detailed information and more examples for coding topics that are of regulatory interest. It is available in English and Japanese and is a living document that is updated as needed. So the companion document covers the topics coding of medication errors and data quality issues, and also includes a section on product quality issues for distributed products reported in the clinical setting, and a new section addressing deviations or non-conformances during the manufacturing process and any quality system issues in between is in development and expected to be released during this year. So let me again now show you where to find these documents on the MedDRA website. Again, how to use support documentation. We have clicked on this already in order to look for the introductory guide, but now we are clicking on this little arrow here under the header Points to Consider Documents and MedDRA Best Practices document. Here we are. Here is the MedDRA Term Selection Points to Consider document, the latest version in different formats. You have a redlined version as well. The redlined version clearly highlights the changes that were made in the document as compared to the previous version. So if you are already familiar with the content of this document, just refer to the redlined version, and it will and you will be easily able to identify the changes. Here is the MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation Points to Consider document, also in different formats and with a redlined version, and the companion document in PDF and Word format. And also MedDRA Best Practices document that is helpful because it includes some aspects how to handle MedDRA versioning, for instance. What different versioning approaches are there? What is the impact of using one of these on your data? So let me switch back and continue. So what can be found in the PTC document? So at the beginning, the Points to Consider document covers some general term selection principles. We will now look at some of these principal coding rules, but time today does not allow to address all of them in more detail. Coding is done on LLT level, the data entry level, as mentioned earlier. The LLT selected should capture as much information provided by the original verbatim as possible. As can be seen in this example, reported is an abscess on the face. So do not just code to abscess, because an abscess could affect many body sites like the brain, the lung, subcutaneous abscess, whatsoever. But code as specifically as possible by assigning LLT facial abscess, because we want to capture as much information from the report as we can, not just the basic concept, the abscess, but also, if possible, the manifestation site. And only current LLTs must be used in ongoing coding. As mentioned earlier, the non-current LLTs are still in the terminology for historical purposes to support interpretation of legacy data and legacy data conversion. When coding, make sure to capture and appropriately classify all reported events. Do not omit medically relevant information. We are not interested in causality because it is captured elsewhere, but we should capture all reports of device-related events, product quality issues, medication errors, medical and social history, investigations, and indications for use as appropriate, depending on regulatory requirements and your coding conventions. And for all coding tasks, the most important MedDRA coding principle applies. Code as reported, meaning that all reported information should be captured and appropriately classified without adding or subtracting information. MedDRA helps us to streamline the reported information, the reported verbatim in a medically meaningful, standardized way. So you have reports about throbbing above temple, aching all over head, pulsing pain in head, really bad headache, etc., etc. All of this can be just coded to headache. So it's a streamlining. Sometimes you won't find a direct match in MedDRA, but infection in lungs can be coded to lung infection. Or patient took drug A instead of drug B and experienced hypertension would need to be split because 2 LLTs have to be assigned here. Wrong drug administered and the subsequent adverse event, the hypertension. Now, this was the first part of the document, the general principles part of it, just shortly addressing this. The second part of the PTC document then addresses some specific coding topics, individual types of data, and how to handle them in operational coding. As you can see, the list of topics is quite comprehensive, with points like diagnosis and provisional diagnosis with or without signs and symptoms, suicide self-harm, combination terms, age versus event specificity, body site versus event specificity, neoplasms, how to handle terms that relate to medical and surgical procedures. So we will not be able to discuss these individual topics in more detail during this webinar due to time constraints, but I will show you one example that is conflicting, ambiguous, vague information in order to give you an impression about the guidance that is provided in the document. And the list continues actually on the next page. If you are not familiar with the document yet, I can only highly recommend to read the document to make yourself familiar with the content so that you know where to find guidance for these coding scenarios. And of course, you should be very much familiar with the content if you are responsible for your own in-house coding conventions in your organization, in order to make sure that your conventions do not contradict the rules and the guidance provided in the PTC document, because then you would really run into problems during inspections. So now let us look at this one example. A frequent problem area is the reporting of conflicting or ambiguous information. And the next 3 slides provide related examples from the PTC document. for MedDRA term selection. If no clarification can be obtained, because this is the first step to take, of course, to query, but if you don't get further information, if there is no option for it, you will have to find a solution for coding such terms. In the first example, the diagnosis hyperkalemia does not match the lab result, that rather indicates hypokalemia. And the recommended coding approach for such terms is to code to the respective abnormal MedDRA LLTs in SOC investigations. This approach captures the fact that the lab result is not normal, but doesn't make any assumptions whether it is below or above the normal range. A different scenario is shown in the second example, where we are confronted with an ambiguous abbreviation that could indicate either genitourinary or gastric ulcer pain. Best solution here, if we don't get further information, is to code to the underlying basic medical concept, that is pain. If you are to code verbatims with abbreviations, check in some references like dictionaries for medical abbreviations in order to find out whether on an international basis the abbreviation will always mean the same thing, so meaning that it is not ambiguous. MedDRA contains abbreviations, yes, but only if they are non-ambiguous. Especially in consumer reports, in pharmacovigilance, vague information may be reported, and there may be no chance for further clarification. Turn green is a nice example here. Here it is. This could relate to a condition in the patient, like a tongue coloration or change in color perception, but it could also relate to a product quality issue. Tablets or capsules may have turned green. So we even don't know whether this affects the patient, and therefore the best code assignment is LLT unavailable event. In the second example here, we are told that a patient had a medical problem of an unclear type. So here it is clear that the patient is affected, and the best coding option is to select LLT, ill-defined disorder. MedDRA includes several LLTs and PTs in SOC General that can be used for such vaguely reported scenarios, like, for instance, PT general symptoms or PT local reaction. And also in SOC investigations, you will find PTs like unavailable investigation or unavailable specimen. Now, any questions, Leander, regarding these coding principles?
No questions, Caroline, but I'm not sure at the end if you're going to demonstrate where to look at the YouTube channel. We've had a couple of people asking about
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is our last topic for today, the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs. And quite soon after MedDRA was more widely used, it became really obvious that standard queries were needed for conditions that are relevant in the context of medicinal product use. Because before the provision of the SMQs, different PTs were selected and used for providing retrieval results to regulators for the same medical condition, like, for example, hepatic damage. So something had to be done, and the concept of the standardized MedDRA queries was born. With the SMQs, industry and regulators can perform searches for a specific condition in the same way, allowing for valid comparisons of safety findings between different databases and for different products. Like any other query, the SMQs represent term groupings related to medical condition or area of interest. In the majority of cases, from more than one MedDRA SOC. They contain terms for clinical signs and symptoms, diagnosis, syndromes, physical findings, lab and other test data, etc. And intend, of course, to support case identification. But the SMQs are standardized ones that are pre-built for you. SMQs are constructed at MedDRA PT level and the LLTs underneath these PTs are automatically included. How does a query work? How would you run an SMQ? So let me illustrate this using this graph. If we start from the left-hand side, we see that we start out with a clinical trial database or safety database, and these databases contain cases with events coded to MedDRA LLTs. So we could have a list of LLTs assigned to reported adverse events for each particular patient. Now let's look at the right-hand side. A query is built on the PT level, and it may be a standardized MedDRA query or a query we built. Ultimately, a query is a list of PTs we think represent the condition of interest. Because the cases in our database are coded to LLTs, the PTs of our query get broken down to the LLTs. And when running the query, a matching process takes place, looking for a hit or match between the LLTs of our list, of our query, and the LLTs used for coding the cases. And if a match is found, a hit, that case will be retrieved, and in this way a list of potentially relevant cases will be created for further medical assessment. I've shown already that the ICH M1 expert working group also provides a PTC document that covers topics related to retrieval and presentation of MedDRA-coded data, and here is a snapshot of the front cover of the latest version that was released beginning of March this year. It is called MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation, Points to Consider. It provides data retrieval and presentation options for industry and regulatory purposes, and also provides details of the impact of choosing one of these options on your data output. It is, of course, most effective and should be used in conjunction with the PTC document for MedDRA term selection, because accurate and consistent MedDRA coding is really a crucial prerequisite for reliable and reproducible data output. And finally, internal approaches and processes for data retrieval and analysis should not be in conflict with what is outlined in this document. With version 27.0, a total of 110 level 1 SMQs are in production, and here you see a few of them, and you can see that these are typical topics in drug development and pharmacovigilance that you would search for. Typical drug-related adverse reactions. You will find medical conditions like hypersensitivity, hepatic disorders, convulsions, etc. But you will also find topics like lack of drug effect or medication errors. So make yourself familiar with the topics that are covered by the SMQs to be able to use them for queries in your database. This way you will not be surprised by a letter from a regulatory agency pointing at a specific safety issue of your product, because regulators do use SMQs on a regular basis for safety signaling in their databases. The benefits of using an SMQ is that they can be applied across multiple therapeutic areas. They are not product or drug class specific. They are validated and rigorously tested before release, usually at least in one industry and in one regulatory database. Excuse me. They are reusable and allow for standardized communication of safety information between pharmaceutical companies and regulators. They also allow for consistency in the way data retrievals are set up and run, so companies and regulators would look for a condition in the same way. Again, standardization. The other big benefit is efficiency, because the SMQs are maintained and versioned centrally by the MSSO and the JMO, thereby reducing the amount of work to be done on your part. However, there are some limitations that you should be aware of. First of all, not all medical topics or safety issues are covered by the SMQs. So there will still be scenarios where you have to build your own query, and that is why it is important that you know how to do it. After release into production, SMQs further evolve and undergo further refinement, even though they have been extensively tested during their development. It is only when they are put into production and subscribers start using them that they provide feedback via the change request process based on their experience. They may have noticed that some terms may be missing in an SMQ, and they think that this PT should be included, for instance, or other PTs may produce too much noise, retrieving a lot of irrelevant cases. So users may therefore ask to make the respective PTs inactive. At first, SMQs were only used in the post-marketing area, but it was quickly realized that they are helpful for broader use in the clinical area as well. SMQs can be utilized in clinical trials for screening when the safety profile is not fully established, or a specific SMQ can be used for case identification to check whether there is a safety issue based on preclinical data or a known class effect, for instance. In post-marketing, selected SMQs can be used to retrieve cases for suspected or known safety issues. They can be applied for signal detection, even using all SMQs in large data sets. Also, single case alerts can be programmed that flag cases where the assigned code matches a PT of a specific SMQ as an early warning system. And SMQs can also be used for periodic reporting to aggregate cases for safety issues or other issues like lack of effect. Any questions related to the SMQs, Leander?
Yeah, we did have one. Thank you, Caroline. What does level 1 SMQ mean? Does that mean there are other?
Yeah, level 1 means that we have some hierarchical SMQs that have sub-SMQs down to level 5. So the level 1 SMQs is the upper level of the SMQs, not considering the sub-SMQs, because then you would see a much larger number.
Thank you, Caroline. There's no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, let me shortly show you in the browser again. We don't have too much time, but I will try to at least address also this question that we just got. So I will now select the SMQ view, and you see that the view changes. You now have all the 110 or 11, I don't recall, SMQs here in the listing in alphabetical order. You see them. And if I open, for instance, hepatic disorders SMQ, you will see that this is a hierarchical SMQ that includes other SMQs. So here we have the drug-related hepatic disorders. You see here level 1 SMQ, level 2 SMQs, level 3 SMQs, level 4 SMQs, and level 5 SMQs. So when I'm talking about level 1, it's just these SMQs I'm talking of, the highest level of the hierarchy. So here you find them, you can open them via the plus sign. You see that there is blue lettering means narrow terms. So with these terms, you have a very specific search. If you add the blue letter, the red letter PTs, then you add the broad terms. You have a broader search that is not as specific, but allows you to have a really very sensitive search. So if you click on the name of the SMQ, you have a short SMQ description. So this is what you can find in the SMQ view. Again, you can also, the configuration options are more or less the same. And if you look into the user guide, you will see that you can also browse the terminology in order to find a certain PT and where this PT, whether this PT is grouped under a specific SMQ. But if you want to have more information about the SMQs, please join the SMQ webinar. There you will get much more information also regarding this browser view. Now I have to hurry up a bit. So this is the last poll for you. PTs that are included in an SMQ may relate to, what do you think? Lab test results, diagnosis, toxicologic issues, clinical syndromes, clinical symptoms, histopathology findings, physical findings, medical and surgical procedures, medical, social, family history, clinical signs, specific types of death and sudden death. I don't see anybody voting.
Just make the QR code slightly larger, Caroline, just for a moment. Thank you.
No, it doesn't seem to work. Nobody's voting. So let me just answer it. So all of them can be included. Everything can be included in SMQs, all these terms, because you want to retrieve all the cases for a specific question that you may have. Not only the diagnosis, but also the related signs and symptoms, the lab tests, other investigational results, surgical procedures that are performed for the condition, etc., etc. So this is a summary of what we have covered today. And this is your last chance for questions. No questions, Leander?
No, I'm just pausing just because I always say no and then something pops in. So no, there's definitely no questions at this time. Thank you, Caroline.
Okay, so these are some contexts of the MSSO, the website URL, the email of the MSSO help desk, an area where you find frequently asked questions, where maybe also your questions may be answered. Again, the link to the MedDRA browsers, to the 3 MedDRA browsers, to the WebCR tool, to the training schedule if you want to join some other webinars, and to the MedDRA support documentation. And here now we are with the contacts. So you can not only contact the MSSO via the help test, but you can contact us or follow us in Facebook, LinkedIn, in X, and we also have a YouTube channel. And these are our social media channels. You see that we have groups in English, Spanish, French, Russian, Indian, and Chinese, and also a contact form. But what I would like to show you is our YouTube channel, because this may be helpful for you. And here I am. And if I click on contact here, I'm brought to this page. And if I click on YouTube channel, here we are. You see all the recorded webinars of the different trainers, also in different languages, not only in English, but also in French, in Russian, in Spanish, in Chinese, in Korean. So of the different trainers that we have, here we are. And you can look at, let's look at one of the, here we are, of our colleague in the US, Nicole. And you see the Coding Basics webinar, the Advanced Coding webinar. So the Data Analysis Query Building with MedDRA, Standardized MedDRA Query webinars, and also tool demonstrations, MedDRA browsers. And we have a separate webinar for coding of medication errors that is provided by different MSSO trainers. And this is the one that we have today. What is MedDRA and how is it used? So if you are not able to join one of the webinars for technical reasons or because of time conflicts, then it's always useful to watch these recorded sessions. Of course, you cannot raise questions, but it's a nice option to get this information. So with this, we have nearly made it on time. I hope you found this webinar useful and hope to meet you again in one of our trainings that we offer. Thank you very much for your interest in today's topic and for your participation. And a big thank you also to you, Leander, for facilitating the session today, for your support. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Caroline. We're having a lot of feedback to say. Thanks very much. Great webinar. We always appreciate your feedback, and you will get a survey as well if you'd like to give us some feedback. We're always interested, and thanks for all the questions and the back and forth. It was really great to have such an interactive audience.
Yes, definitely. So goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.